Your sister finally has stability, my mom said as she passed the gravy. When will you grow up? I just looked at her and said, probably around the time I bought my third property. Her jaw dropped, so did her fork. I've been lurking on this subreddit for months, reading everyone's stories about family drama and finally getting their comeuppance. Never thought I'd be writing one of my own, but here we are. This happened at Thanksgiving dinner 2 weeks ago, and I'm still processing everything that went down. Some background: I'm Sarah, 31 now, and I have an older sister Emma who's 35. Growing up, Emma was always the responsible one in my parents' eyes. She followed the traditional path: college, steady boyfriend, now husband Mike, corporate job, house in the suburbs, 2 kids by 30. Meanwhile, I was the free spirit who couldn't seem to get her life together. After high school, I didn't go straight to college like Emma did. Instead, I worked at a local coffee shop while trying to figure out what I wanted to do. My parents were not thrilled, especially when Emma graduated with honors and landed a job at a marketing firm right away. The comparison started immediately. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mom's favorite phrase. Emma has her life figured out. She's building something stable with Mike. When are you going to stop playing around and get serious about your future? I eventually did go to college, but I took a different route. I went to community college first to save money, then transferred to a state school where I studied business with a focus on real estate. My parents saw this as me finally getting my act together, but they still made it clear they thought I was behind where I should be. Emma, meanwhile, got engaged during my sophomore year. The wedding planning became a family obsession. Every conversation somehow turned into wedding talk. Emma's dress fitting is next week, or Emma and Mike found the perfect venue, or Emma's so organized with all the planning. I felt invisible. During the wedding preparation period, I was working part-time while going to school and had started learning about real estate investing on the side. I'd spend hours watching YouTube videos, reading books, and listening to podcasts about property investment. My family thought it was just another one of my phases. "Sarah's always got some new idea," my dad would say with an eye roll. "Remember when she wanted to be a photographer? Or start that jewelry business? This real estate thing is just another distraction from focusing on her degree." But I was serious about it. Really serious. I'd been saving every penny from my part-time jobs and had been researching the local market extensively. By the time Emma's wedding rolled around, I had enough saved for a down payment on a small duplex in a neighborhood that I knew was about to gentrify. The wedding was beautiful, don't get me wrong. Emma looked stunning, and Mike seemed genuinely happy. But the entire event felt like a celebration of everything I wasn't. During the reception, I must have heard 50 times how proud my parents were of Emma, how she'd found such a wonderful man, how stable and secure their future looked. I bought my first property 3 months after Emma's wedding. It was a small duplex that needed some work, but the bones were good and the location was perfect. I lived in one unit and rented out the other. The rental income covered most of my mortgage, and I put sweat equity into fixing up both sides. When I told my family, the reaction was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, honey," my mom said. "But don't you think you should focus on finishing school first? And what about finding someone to settle down with? Emma and Mike are already talking about starting a family." My dad was more direct. "Real estate is risky, Sarah. You could lose everything if the market crashes. Emma has a steady job with benefits. That's real security." I tried to explain my strategy, how I'd researched the area, how the rental income was covering my costs, how property values were already starting to rise. But I could see their eyes glazing over. They didn't take it seriously. Emma's reaction was the worst though. "That's great, Sarah," she said with that condescending smile she'd perfected over the years. "Playing landlord sounds fun. Just make sure you have a backup plan when reality hits." Playing landlord. That comment stung more than I let on. I graduated college the following year while managing my duplex and working part-time at a real estate agency to learn the business from the inside. The duplex had appreciated significantly, and the rental income was solid. I was living essentially for free while building equity. Emma and Mike bought their house around the same time I graduated. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in a nice suburban development. The kind of house that screams we've made it to the outside world. My parents couldn't stop talking about it. Emma and Mike found the perfect family home, my mom gushed. "It's in such a great school district. They're really thinking ahead." Meanwhile, I'd started looking for my second property. The equity I'd built in the duplex, combined with the savings from living rent-free, gave me enough for another down payment. I found a small single-family home in another up-and-coming area. It needed more work than the duplex, but the potential was enormous. When I closed on the second property, my family's reaction was mixed. My parents seemed confused more than anything. "Why do you need 2 houses, Sarah?" my mom asked. "Wouldn't it make more sense to sell the first one and buy something bigger for yourself? You know, a real home where you could start a family?" "These are investments, Mom," I explained. "The rental income from both properties is covering the mortgages plus giving me cash flow. I'm building wealth." But what about stability? My dad chimed in. What happens if you can't find tenants? What if something major breaks? Emma has a steady paycheck and benefits. That's dependable. I was getting frustrated, but I tried to stay patient. Dad, I have great tenants in both places. I've been profitable every month. And I'm still working at the real estate agency, so I have income from that too. Emma's response was predictably dismissive. Sarah's always been a risk taker, she said to Mike in front of everyone. I'm glad we went the traditional route. I sleep better at night knowing we have job security and a stable situation. The thing is, Emma and Mike's stable situation wasn't as stable as they made it seem. Through family conversations over the following months, I learned that they were stretched pretty thin financially. The big house came with a big mortgage, plus they had Emma's student loans, car payments, and all the expenses that come with their lifestyle. Emma had gotten pregnant shortly after they bought the house, and they were talking about her maybe staying home with the baby for a while. But with their expenses, losing her income would be tough. Mike's job was stable, but it wasn't enough to comfortably cover everything on his own. Meanwhile, my real estate ventures were thriving. Both properties had excellent tenants, and the values were continuing to appreciate. The cash flow was good enough that I'd cut back to part-time at the real estate agency and was spending more time managing my properties and looking for the next opportunity. I found it about a year and a half after buying the second property. It was a small apartment building, 4 units, in a neighborhood that was clearly on the upswing. The seller was motivated, and I was able to negotiate a great price. Between the equity I built in my first 2 properties and the cash flow I'd been banking, I qualified for the loan. This was going to be my third property, and it felt like a major milestone. 4 rental units plus my own residence in the duplex meant 5 income streams from real estate. The numbers were solid, and I could see a clear path to financial independence. But I didn't tell my family about it right away. I was tired of their reactions, tired of having to justify my choices, tired of being made to feel like I was doing something wrong when everything was actually going really well. Emma had her baby around this time, a beautiful little girl named Lucy. The family attention shifted entirely to the new arrival, which was fine with me. I was busy with the apartment building anyway, getting it up to standards and finding good tenants. Emma decided to extend her maternity leave and eventually became a stay-at-home mom full-time. Mike's income was stretched to cover everything, but they made it work. At least, that's what they told everyone. Through my mom's comments over the following months, I gathered that things were tighter than Emma and Mike let on. There were mentions of them having to be careful with expenses, of Emma clipping coupons and shopping sales, of them deciding to postpone some home improvements they'd been planning. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being budget conscious. But it was a stark contrast to the stability narrative that had been pushed so hard when they bought the house. My real estate portfolio, on the other hand, was performing better than I'd projected. All the properties were occupied with good tenants, the cash flow was strong, and the appreciation had been significant. I was essentially living for free while banking several $1,000s a month in rental income. I'd also started getting my real estate license and was transitioning into real estate sales as well. The combination of rental income and sales commissions was adding up to a very comfortable living. But my family still saw me as the less stable one. At Emma's baby shower, I heard my aunt ask my mom, "How's Sarah doing? Has she settled down yet?" "She's still playing around with those rental properties," my mom replied. "We keep hoping she'll meet someone nice and start thinking about a real future." A real future. As if building a successful real estate portfolio wasn't real. During this period, I also started dating someone, a guy named David who worked in construction and understood the real estate business. We met when I hired his company to do some renovations on the apartment building. He was impressed by what I'd built and actually encouraged my ambitions instead of questioning them. The contrast between David's support and my family's skepticism was stark. When I told David about my plans for expansion, he'd ask thoughtful questions about cap rates and market analysis. When I told my family the same things, they'd ask when I was going to settle down and be realistic. David and I had been dating for about 8 months when Emma started making comments about him too. "He seems nice," she said after meeting him at a family barbecue, "but isn't he just a construction worker? I mean, what kind of future can you build with someone like that?" I was furious. "Someone like that? David owns his own construction company, Emma. He employs 12 people and probably makes more money than Mike does." But the damage was done. Even when I was dating someone, it wasn't good enough because he didn't fit their narrow definition of success. The relationship with David eventually ended about a year later, not because of my family's comments, but because our business goals started to conflict. He wanted me to partner with him on some larger commercial projects in other cities, but I was focused on building my local portfolio first. We agreed to stay friends and maintain our professional relationship, which is why he continued to help me with renovation projects. It was purely business after that. He'd give me contractor rates, and I'd refer clients to his company through my real estate sales. Around this time, I made what would turn out to be one of my smartest financial moves. I'd been watching a particular neighborhood that was clearly gentrifying, new restaurants opening, young professionals moving in, property values starting to tick up. There was a small triplex for sale that had been on the market for months because it needed significant work. The seller was motivated, and I was able to negotiate a price that was well below market value even in its current condition. I knew that with the right renovations, this property could command premium rents and appreciate significantly. I decided to take a more hands-on approach with this renovation. Instead of hiring everything out, I worked alongside contractors to learn the trades myself. I spent weekends tiling bathrooms, painting walls, and refinishing hardwood floors. David, even though we'd broken up, helped me with some of the more complex electrical and plumbing work. My family thought I'd lost my mind. "Sarah's gutting some old house now," I heard my mom tell my aunt on the phone. "She comes to dinner with paint under her fingernails and talks about subflooring like it's fascinating. I just don't understand what happened to my daughter." Emma was even more direct. "You're 30 years old, Sarah, and you're spending your weekends doing manual labor. Don't you think there are better uses of your time? Like maybe trying to meet someone who could actually provide for you?" But I wasn't just doing manual labor, I was learning skills that would save me thousands of dollars on future projects and gaining a deeper understanding of property values and renovation costs. Plus, there was something incredibly satisfying about transforming a rundown property into something beautiful and functional. The triplex renovation took 4 months, working mostly evenings and weekends while continuing to manage my other properties and real estate sales. When it was finished, it was stunning. I converted it into 3 luxury units that each rented for significantly more than I'd originally projected. This was my 3rd property now, and the renovation success gave me confidence to look for the 4th, the apartment building I'd mentioned to my family. That became property number 4, and the cash flow from all my rentals was strong enough that I transitioned to full-time real estate sales while managing my properties. But when I tried to share this success with my family, the response was predictably underwhelming. "That's nice, honey," my dad said. "But all that work you put in, don't you think your time would have been better spent focusing on your personal life? Emma and Mike are talking about having another baby. Wouldn't you like to start thinking about building a family instead of just accumulating property?" I wanted to scream. I just completed a major renovation project that had increased my net worth by 6 figures, and they were still focused on why I wasn't married with kids. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "I just made more money in 4 months than most people make in 2 years. How is that not worth celebrating?" "Money isn't everything, Sarah," my mom chimed in. "Emma has something money can't buy, a loving family, stability, a sense of purpose beyond just making more money." It was around this time that I learned Emma and Mike were actually having some serious financial problems. Emma let it slip during a conversation about holiday plans that they might not be able to afford their usual trip to see Mike's parents because money was a little tight right now. When I pressed gently for details, the full picture emerged. Mike's company had been downsizing, and while he hadn't lost his job, his hours had been cut back. Emma had quit her marketing job when she decided to stay home full-time with Lucy, which had seemed like a luxury decision at the time. But now, with Mike's reduced hours, losing that income was devastating. They were behind on their mortgage payments and had been using credit cards to cover basic expenses. I felt terrible for them, but I was also frustrated by the irony. Here was the stable couple that my parents constantly held up as an example, and they were one emergency away from financial disaster. Meanwhile, I had multiple income streams, no debt except strategic mortgages, and enough cash reserves to weather any storm. I offered to help Emma and Mike financially, but Emma's pride wouldn't let her accept. "We'll figure it out," she said. "This is just a temporary rough patch. Mike's company will bounce back, and things will get better." But things didn't get better. Over the following months, I watched my sister and brother-in-law struggle with increasing desperation. Mike took a second job driving for a ride-share company on weekends. Emma started selling things on Facebook Marketplace, first items they didn't need, then things they actually wanted to keep. The stress was clearly affecting their marriage too. At family gatherings, they barely spoke to each other, and when they did, there was an underlying tension that was painful to watch. My parents seemed oblivious to their financial struggles, or maybe they were in denial. They continued to praise Emma and Mike's stable lifestyle while making subtle digs about my risky real estate ventures. This denial reached peak absurdity when Emma and Mike had to sell their house. They couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments, and rather than lose it to foreclosure, they decided to sell and move into a rental apartment. It was a smart financial move, actually. It would eliminate their mortgage payment and give them a fresh start. But it was also a clear sign that their stable lifestyle hadn't been as stable as everyone pretended. When Emma told the family about the decision, she tried to spin it positively. "We've decided that homeownership isn't right for us at this stage in our lives," she said. "Renting will give us more flexibility and freedom from maintenance responsibilities." My parents bought this explanation completely. "That's very wise," my mom said. "There's a lot to be said for not being tied down to one property. You're being very practical." I sat there listening to this conversation with my mouth hanging open. When I started investing in rental properties, I was being risky and impractical. But when Emma and Mike were forced to sell their house due to financial pressure, they were being wise and practical. The double standard was so blatant it was almost comical. But the situation got even more ironic when Emma asked if they could rent the house they'd just sold. The new owners were planning to use it as a rental property, and Emma wondered if they could stay as tenants. It would be perfect, she told me privately. We know the house, Lucy is comfortable there, and we wouldn't have to move. I gently pointed out that this meant they'd be paying rent to live in a house they used to own, essentially making mortgage payments for someone else instead of building their own equity. I know, Emma said, tears in her eyes. But what choice do we have? We can't afford to buy right now, and at least this way Lucy doesn't have to change schools. I felt awful for her, but I also couldn't help thinking about all the times she dismissed my real estate investments as playing landlord. Now she was going to be paying rent to someone who was doing exactly what I'd been doing all along. The new owners did agree to rent to Emma and Mike, which solved their immediate housing problem but created a new source of stress. Emma was constantly worried about whether their rent would go up, whether the new owners would sell again, whether they'd be forced to move. I hate not having control over our housing situation, she confided to me. When we owned the house, at least we knew where we stood. Now we're at the mercy of someone else's decisions. I bit my tongue and didn't point out that this was exactly why I'd gotten into real estate investing in the first place, to have control over my housing situation and create multiple income streams so I'd never be at anyone else's mercy. Meanwhile, my own real estate portfolio continued to grow. The triplex renovation had been so successful that I'd started looking for other value-add opportunities. I found a small commercial building, a former office space that could be converted into retail units, in an area that was being mismanaged by an out-of-state owner who was tired of dealing with it. With some renovation, it could become a profitable small retail plaza. This would be my 5th property, and it felt like a major milestone. The numbers worked well, especially with the potential to increase rents once the renovations were complete and I could market it properly. I made an offer that was accepted, and suddenly I was a commercial real estate owner. This purchase pushed my total real estate portfolio value over the $3 million mark, between the duplex, single-family home, triplex, apartment building, and now this commercial building. Though I didn't share this milestone with my family. I was tired of their lukewarm responses to my success. The commercial building turned out to be an even better investment than I'd projected. After renovating it into 4 retail units, I was able to rent 3 of them immediately at rates higher than I'd originally projected. One tenant even wanted to expand into the 4th unit within 6 months. The cash flow was excellent, and the property had significant appreciation potential as the area continued to develop. I was also doing well with real estate sales, having built a reputation as someone who really understood investment properties. Other investors started coming to me for deals, and I was earning substantial commissions helping them buy and sell properties. Between my rental income and sales commissions, I was making more money than I'd ever imagined possible. But more importantly, I'd created true financial security for myself. I could lose half my tenants and still cover all my expenses. I could stop doing sales tomorrow and live comfortably on rental income alone. Yet my family continued to see Emma as the one who had figured out life, even as her financial situation became more precarious. Around this time, I started working on getting my real estate broker's license so I could open my own brokerage. The timing felt right. I had enough experience as an agent, a solid understanding of the market, and the financial stability to take the risk. A few months later, Emma and Mike's situation reached a crisis point. I'm just so proud of how Emma has stepped into motherhood, my mom said. She's created such a beautiful, stable home for her family. That's what really matters in life. Mike nodded along. We're blessed to have built something solid together. Sure, money's tight sometimes, but we have what's important: family, stability, a secure foundation. I could feel the implied criticism. Here they were, celebrating Emma's choices while subtly suggesting that my path was somehow less meaningful. What about you, Sarah? My dad asked, though his tone suggested he already knew he wouldn't approve of my answer. Any thoughts about settling down? You're not getting any younger. I'd had enough. I'm perfectly settled, Dad. I have a successful real estate business, multiple income streams, and more financial security than most people my age. Emma laughed. Sarah, renting out a couple properties isn't exactly a business empire. Don't you want something more meaningful? Like a family? That's when I lost it a little bit. More meaningful than financial independence? I'm 27 years old, I own 3 properties, and I'm making more money than I ever thought possible. How is that not meaningful? 3 properties? My mom looked confused. I thought you had 2. I realized I'd let it slip about the apartment building. I hadn't officially told them about it yet because I was tired of their lukewarm reactions. I bought an apartment building 6 months ago, I said. 4 units. It's doing really well. The room went quiet. I could see my parents processing this information, trying to figure out if it was good news or something to be concerned about. Emma recovered first. Well, that sounds... Ambitious. I hope you're not overextending yourself. Remember what happened in 2008? There it was. The constant assumption that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was being reckless, that my success was somehow accidental or unsustainable. Things stayed tense between Emma and me after that dinner. We barely spoke for months, communicating mainly through our parents when necessary. Meanwhile, my real estate business continued to grow. I'd gotten my license and was doing well with sales in addition to managing my rental properties. The cash flow was excellent, and I was already looking at potential fourth and fifth properties. Emma and Mike, from what I could gather through family updates, were struggling more than they'd admit. Mike had been passed over for a promotion he'd been counting on, and Emma had mentioned needing to be even more careful with spending. I wasn't happy about their struggles, but I was frustrated by the continued narrative that their path was somehow more secure or responsible than mine. This whole situation came to a head at Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago. We were all gathered at my parents' house, me, Emma, Mike, baby Lucy, now a toddler, and my parents. The conversation was pleasant enough at first, focused on Lucy's development and general family updates. By this point, I'd actually closed on a sixth property the month before, a small office building downtown that I bought from a retiring lawyer. It was fully leased to an accounting firm on a long-term contract, and the return on investment was fantastic. But I hadn't mentioned it to my family yet, knowing they'd find some way to diminish the achievement. But then, as we were eating dinner, my mom started in on her favorite topic. "Emma, I'm just so impressed with how you've created such a stable home environment for Lucy," she said, passing the gravy. "You've really found your calling as a mother. It's wonderful to see someone who has their priorities straight." I felt my jaw clench, but I tried to stay quiet. "Thanks, Mom," Emma said, beaming. "It hasn't always been easy, especially financially, but Mike and I are committed to providing Lucy with security and stability. That's what matters most." My dad nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. There's something to be said for the traditional approach. Building a solid foundation, making responsible choices, thinking about the future." The implied criticism was clear as always. Emma had made responsible choices. Emma was thinking about the future. Emma had stability. Then my mom looked directly at me. "Your sister finally has stability," she said, as if this was some great achievement that had been in doubt. "When will you grow up?" The question hit me like a slap. After everything I'd accomplished, after building a successful real estate portfolio from nothing, after achieving financial independence before age 30, my own mother was asking when I would grow up. I looked around the table. Emma was smirking slightly, clearly enjoying the moment. Mike was nodding along with my parents. Lucy was the only one who seemed oblivious to the tension, happily making a mess with her sweet potatoes. I set down my fork and looked directly at my mom. "Probably around the time I bought my third property." The words came out calmly, but they landed like a bomb. My mom's jaw dropped, and her fork clattered to her plate. "Your third property?" my dad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, did I not mention?" I said, enjoying the moment more than I probably should have. "I closed on a small office building downtown last month. It's fully leased to an accounting firm on a 5-year contract. The return on investment is fantastic." Emma's smirk had completely disappeared. "You bought an office building?" I said, taking a bite of turkey. "It's actually my sixth property total, if we're counting everything," I said, taking a bite of turkey. "The duplex, the single-family home, the triplex, the apartment building, the retail plaza, and now the office building." The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. I could practically see the wheels turning in everyone's heads as they tried to process this information. How can you afford all this?" my mom finally asked. "Well," I said, setting down my water glass, "when you buy smart and manage well, each property generates income that helps you qualify for the next one. It's called building wealth. The cash flow from my first 5 properties, plus my real estate brokerage income, made the office building purchase pretty straightforward." Mike cleared his throat. "But the risk." "What risk?" I asked genuinely. "I have multiple income streams, excellent tenants, properties in appreciating areas, and enough cash flow to cover all my expenses plus save for future investments. How is that riskier than depending on a single employer for your entire financial security?" Emma looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. "But what about having a family? What about stability?" "Emma," I said gently, "I have more stability than most people dream of. I could lose half my tenants tomorrow and still be fine. My properties have appreciated by over 60% in the past 5 years. I have no debt except strategic mortgages that my tenants are paying down for me. How is that not stable?" My dad was still staring at me. "You own 6 properties?" "6 properties generating rental income, plus I live in 1 unit of the duplex," I confirmed. "And I own my own real estate brokerage now. I'm looking at a 7th property actually. There's a small apartment complex that just came on the market that looks very promising." Emma seemed to find her voice again. But Sarah, what's the point of all this if you don't have someone to share it with? Don't you want a husband? Kids? I looked at her carefully before answering. Emma, I'm 31 years old and financially independent. I can choose to have a family on my own terms, when I want to, without worrying about whether we can afford it. I can choose a partner based on love and compatibility, not financial necessity. How is that not better than struggling to pay bills and hoping nothing goes wrong? The truth of that statement seemed to hit everyone at once. Emma and Mike exchanged a glance that told me I'd struck close to home. My mom was still processing. So you're wealthy? I couldn't help but laugh a little. Mom, I'm very successful. I built a real estate portfolio worth over $4 million in total asset value. My monthly cash flow is more than most people's salaries. I'm 31 years old and I never have to worry about money again if I don't want to. The numbers seemed to stun everyone into silence again. Finally, Emma spoke up and her voice was smaller than usual. $4 million? In total asset value, yes, I said. Obviously there are mortgages against most of it, but the equity I've built plus the cash flow. I'm doing well. Mike was looking at me with something like respect for the first time ever. How did you learn to do all this? Books, podcasts, mentors, trial and error, I said. The same way anyone learns anything. I just focused on it instead of assuming it was too complicated or risky. My dad shook his head slowly. All this time, we thought. You thought I was irresponsible and unfocused, I finished. I know. You made it pretty clear. Emma was staring at her plate. I had no idea it was going so well for you. I tried to tell you, I said. Multiple times. But every time I shared something about my business, you either dismissed it or warned me about the risks. It got exhausting trying to justify my success to people who had already decided I was making mistakes. My mom looked genuinely ashamed. Sarah, we didn't understand. No, you didn't, I agreed. But you also didn't try to understand. You just assumed that because my path was different from Emma's, it must be wrong. The rest of dinner was quiet and awkward. Emma barely spoke, and when we were clearing the table, she pulled me aside. Sarah, I owe you an apology, she said, and she looked like she meant it. I've been dismissive of what you were doing. I didn't realize how successful you'd become. It's okay, I said, though we both knew it wasn't really. No, it's not okay, she continued. I think I was maybe a little jealous. And scared. Scared of what? She looked around to make sure no one was listening. Scared that you were right. That there was a better way to do things and I'd chosen wrong. That admission surprised me. Emma, you didn't choose wrong. You chose what was right for you. The problem was everyone acting like your way was the only right way. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Mike and I are struggling, Sarah. More than we've let on. We're living paycheck to paycheck, and if anything happened to his job. She didn't finish the sentence. I felt bad for her then. Is there anything I can do to help? She shook her head. You've done enough by proving that there are other ways to build security. Maybe you could teach me some of what you've learned? Of course, I said. We hugged then, really hugged, for the first time in years. My parents pulled me aside before I left that night. Both of them looked embarrassed and proud at the same time, an interesting combination. Sarah, my dad said, we owe you a huge apology. We've been unfair to you. We just didn't understand, my mom added. We thought we were protecting you by encouraging you to follow a more traditional path. I know, I said. But maybe next time, you could try to understand what I'm actually doing before deciding whether it's good or bad? They both nodded emphatically. As I drove home that night to my duplex, my first property, the one they'd all dismissed as playing landlord, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindicated because I'd finally gotten the recognition I deserved, but sad because it had taken so long and caused so much tension. The best part, though, was the text I got from Emma 2 days later. Hey, I've been thinking about our conversation. Would you be willing to help Mike and me look into maybe buying a small rental property? We have some equity in our house that we could tap into. I smiled and texted back, absolutely. Let's start with some books I can recommend, and then we can look at numbers together. Maybe it's never too late to grow up, for any of us. The family dynamic has definitely shifted since that dinner. My parents now ask about my real estate business with genuine interest instead of concern. Emma and I text regularly about investment strategies and market trends. Mike has started reading the books I recommended and seems genuinely excited about the possibility of building some additional income streams. And me? I'm still looking at that apartment complex. The numbers look really good, and it would be nice to add some larger multifamily diversity to my portfolio. After all, girls got to keep growing up.